So the series of work in this online exhibition for Trocadero Online is some drawings that I've made during lockdown in my studio and also some oil paintings. So I've been exploring some themes of intimacy and alienation during the lockdown period. The theme of intimacy is being explored through the use of the drawing medium. So I have been using charcoal and exploring the difference between the qualities for painting and drawing, because I feel that there's a more sense of intimacy and a closeness with the artist's psychology through drawing. During COVID, I used to go for walks like lots of us, and I came across this scene of a playground with the council had put around the "do not go on." So I was kind of exploring this sort of theme of feeling alienated from spaces that were usually, places that we used to have fun, and I guess also within that, the psychology of what COVID and lockdown has kind of had on people, and being inside, which is obviously quite intimate, but also this sense of alienation from the world because of what's happening. I've really tried to capture this sort of, sense of isolating imagery and kind of treating both like a landscape or a place similarly as I would to a figure. So not sort of creating a democracy of mark making and not necessarily making a figure more important than the space around it, and really treating it all equally. Yeah, so I guess when I'm taking photos, I am always looking for compositions. I think that I look at it as a painter. And so I'm looking at colour, texture, how I might translate that into a painting. But sometimes I've found that the photographs are just as interesting or are capturing what I want to say more effectively. So I'm always sort of oscillating between whether I'd like to best represent my ideas through a photograph or through a drawing or through a painting. And I think that often lends itself just through exploration and trial and error. So sort of just trying, I might try like a particular composition through drawing, through painting, and it might have started as a photograph. A lot of these works have been made from photographs, and sometimes I don't necessarily think it's important to share that, but I think for me, when I do that, the works often take on a more narrative or even perhaps more graphic quality. So I think the artists that I look at for inspiration or ideas and that have really influenced me are so Richard Diebenkorn, American Bay Area painter. So the way that he flattens the space, and I think he kind of democratizes like what I was speaking about, whether there's a figure or it's a landscape, there's this real looking at space and line and breaking up the image into parts that kind of all come together. Also another LA painter, more contemporary, Alison Schutlick. So she uses really thick impasto paint, but I think I really love her palette, like the colours that she uses, and she does also do a lot of domestic scenes. And then another really interesting place at the moment that I've been looking at is the Drawing Room in London. So there was an exhibition which I saw online, just watching videos during lockdown, of this artist called Vanessa Baird. So her process is really interesting because she does have a studio, but she's got a really chaotic family life, and so a lot of her work has been made in situ, like in domestic scenes, and that's that chaos and that like trying to find place for art in her busy life is really interesting, and her work really captures that domestic and that sense of intimacy, I guess.
So the algorithms that I'm using for the creation of images for this exhibition are captioning and classification algorithms. So they're used by companies such as Facebook to help tag your face in images and stuff like that, and to help sort of large-scale computer vision and machine learning projects to help to sort of classify and label different images.
Yeah.
So I think by handing off the sort of labeling and objective classification of sort of my works to a computer, I'm kind of trying to comment on how algorithms have a lot of sort of hidden influence on the way that we interact online and the way that we see things online. So how those algorithms and how those sort of tools intersect with the processes of making and image making. So part of my thinking behind creating these works is to try and sort of distance myself and my own sort of aesthetic preferences and stuff like that from the outputted work, and to kind of hand off a lot of the decision making that's traditionally in the hands of the artist to a sort of unknown variable, so like a computer algorithm. So also prevalent in these works is the sort of hidden but inherent bias that occurs in machine learning algorithms that are generally seen as sort of scientific or objective sort of truth generators, especially like image classification algorithms, the type that I'm using for these works. But unfortunately, they are built by humans, and so eventually they just become sort of an aggregate of human error and human biases, which are sort of obfuscated or hidden by their sort of pseudo-scientific status in society. The fact that a lot of people don't understand how they work means that they can get away with a lot of sort of uneven representation of certain categories of images and certain ways of describing images. Part of the creation of this work was to try and investigate sort of the boundaries between artificial intelligence and sort of human intelligence and where they intersect. I think, obviously there's going to be a sort of injection of my own aesthetic preferences, I suppose, in the images that I've chosen to display, but I, as much as possible, am trying to leave sort of the aesthetic choices up to the computer to see how much they might sync up with my own, or to see how much they might make sense to an audience. Mm-hmm. So, during lockdown and COVID and stuff, obviously there hasn't been that many opportunities to exhibit in physical space. So I've definitely been exploring other options, exhibiting online as we are now, and trying to find alternate methods of distribution, especially sort of decentralized methods. So. I don't know, I would like these images to sort of join this stream because I think a lot of people have become aware of, especially with a lot of us living primarily online and working online in the last couple of years, that, there's this stream of media, there's this stream of images that kind of signifying all sorts of things and have these symbolic associations for us. Sort of even a fleeting glimpse of one of these images in a stream. Like I think the associations I'm trying to explore are more sort of subconscious or intuitive. So I think, just having them hang on a gallery wall and having somebody give them sort of due process by looking at them for a couple of minutes isn't really necessary for these works. I think the mass consumption of images is just a phenomenon in modern society. Like, I don't think it's necessarily, you know, devaluing images to have them all side by side and put together in a stream. I guess it's like about how people sort of engage with them. So I think, like, it's, for me as an artist, I find it kind of important to consider people's inattention and people's kind of inability to focus on, you know, a particular set of images nowadays, and that's just echoing my own kind of inability to focus on images due to, you know, just the online flood of images and media that's always happening. So, you know, hopefully that's translated through the works. When lockdown started back in the sort of relatively merry old days of, you know, the first lockdowns when everybody was baking bread and sort of feeling hopeful for this sort of holiday that they had, I made a series of works based on sort of generating human faces, one of which was This Mask Does Not Exist, which was a kind of play on an algorithm called StyleGAN. So I trained that same algorithm on images of people in masks, just to see what it would look like to have, and this was very early before, you know, we knew what everyone would look like wearing masks, just to sort of see what it might look like to have, you know, everybody wearing masks, which we're all so used to now, but that was about April last year. So I'm definitely very influenced by sort of Hito Stale's work, specifically kind of her work surrounding the online and offline realities and how they sort of intersect and seed each other. She's made some quite sort of bold statements about how, you know, the whole of human reality is moving online, and, you know, we need to be careful about where humanity ends and where AI begins and stuff. And so I find her works as a really interesting jumping off point for an investigation into sort of the boundaries between human and computer and sort of behavioral associations with technology and stuff like that. And also Trevor Paglen brought out a work called ImageNet Roulette, and that was intended to show sort of the inherent bias behind machine learning algorithms, specifically ImageNet, which was like the largest and most comprehensive algorithm at the time, but, you know, had a lot of really problematic language associated with it, and eventually they had to take ImageNet down because it was very kind of offensive in its output. That work was really important in showing the sort of bias and fallibility, the human fallibility of a computer-generated image.